Hey, this is Thunder. Yours truly, the Desert Shaman, here again for some philosophical and mythological advice or stories. Crimes against humanity, the ultimate crimes against humanity is the name of this video. I'm going to tell a little story here. I'm going to frame this video in a fictional story or a mythological story, however you want to view it. Fictional or mythological would be good. That way we stay completely out of trouble. The ultimate crimes against humanity. Well, let's start out. Once upon a time, there were a group of people. We'll call them the anthropos, which means humanity. There was a group of people, or the anthropos, were living on this beautiful blue, brown, green sphere called a planet. And there was a whole lot of people on this planet, supposedly. Well, let's just say around 7.5 to 8 billion people. And the planet was a good-sized planet. It could hold that many people. But there's another group of people amongst this whole group of anthropos. There's a small group of people, relatively small in comparison to the total populace of the planet, actually almost infinitesimally small group of people that have decided upon themselves to manage the planet the way they saw fit, to manage a planet that they felt was overburdened with too many people. Why would they think that there was too many people? Well, because they had this agenda of controlling people. And so they felt that the more people that were on the planet, the harder it might be to control them, so they better nip this in the bud and get a handle on this. And cause a plan to be put into effect. They sat around, well, what should we do? This is them talking. Well, what should we do? It's just getting out of hand here. There's too many people on the planet. We have our agenda, and the more people that we have on the planet, what are we going to do? I mean, it might be harder to take control of them. Another person goes, well, we tried the thing with the two twin tower. We tried that plan. And let's call these plans or missions, let's name them. Let's call the first plan with the two towers, where they had two big giant birds crash into these towers and kill over 3,000 people. Let's call that Covert 9.0. And that served a big purpose for these people that wanted to control the earth, because it instituted more control through fear and through war and through a perceived enemy. The enemy that flew these big birds into these two twin towers was in a group of people called terrorists, or the populace knew them as Middle Eastern terrorists. So that was Covert 9.0, and that plan succeeded in a large way by instituting more control measures and more laws to be framed in the dialogue or the narrative, to be framed in a certain narrative that included, again, a terrorist enemy. Anybody could be a terrorist. They went one step further in this thing, and instead of having a state that was on this planet, an opposing state, or an enemy that you can identify, they covertly made an enemy you couldn't identify because it could be anybody and it could be anywhere and it could be universal. So what fits that concept? Well, the word terrorist fits that concept, because a terrorist could be anybody and it could be framed in any way and it could be put on anybody. So that was the first plan that these people that all got together and were talking about, population control, and just control of the masses and being able to tell everybody what to do. In other words, being the conscience for humanity, or the nanny for humanity. So that plan worked, but they decided that they wanted to take it to the nth degree, and so they established Covert 10.0. And they all sat around. They said, well, that one worked pretty good. We established some new laws. We put certain acts, and we'll call them, we'll name them in alignment with the written set of laws that this nation has, that they call the Constitution. We'll make it in line with that, and we'll pass an act that will be for patriots to the Constitution, and we'll call it the Patriot Act, when in reality it wasn't a Patriot Act at all. It was just an act of further control, rules and laws to control the people. And in order for the people to obey these laws, they figured, well, these people are all patriots, so we'll make it look like that they're being patriotic when they obey all these laws. And some of these laws were to stifle weapons, and to just all kinds of laws in there that took away certain rights out of the Constitution. Now they decided that that worked out pretty well, and so they decided, well, that they were going to further establish even more control to the nth degree, like I said before, and they would call it, again, Covert 10.0. And what is Covert 10.0? Well, since we used fear in the last Covert 9.0, and it worked really well, we'll use that same tactic again in a different way. Because you see, in that 9.0 plan that they had, it didn't really affect all the people. It affected more like one nation, although other nations were somewhat taken aback by it. It basically affected one nation on this planet. And that's where these people that sit around in their high and mighty towers, ivory towers, they decided that they would impose this upon this one particular nation. But now they figured, well, you know what? As a collective, and there were groups of people from all nations in this collective, or that ruled all nations. Let's say a higher up on the totem pole, or on the ladder, or on the food chain, had control over many nations, and they decided, well, instead of just having us focus on one nation, we need something to control people on the whole planet. Because obviously the population encompassed the whole planet. So they said, well, what can we do now to put the whole planet in fear and the whole planet under our control? We're going to have to use every network we have in our matrix to accomplish this. But what will be the kicker for it? What will kick this off? What kind of, let's say, straw man can we use? What kind of tactic that we're familiar with can we use? Again, only heavier, more intense, and more fearful. Well, what are people afraid of? Well, let's look at what people believe, they said. So they looked at the Christian Bible and they thought, well, this is a good place to start right here, because the majority of these people believe things that are written in this book. So let's take some things out of the book. Oh, here's one. How about a plague? How about a plague? How about a illness? How about a apocalyptic illness? One that threatens the whole planet, one that will put fear in everybody on the planet, put fear about death. That's the big one, isn't it? Fear about death. Terrorists, yeah, they may kill you, but we have to cook up something here. And so, well, in order to spread a disease, we could make up a thing named after this plan called Covert 10.0. And what we will do is that we will say this is a type of germ that all of a sudden appears out of nowhere, seemingly from like an Far Eastern state, or Middle Eastern state, wherever. Maybe we should have it come from both, or maybe we'll decide on that later. But what we will do is we will pull the same old playbook. We will take a play out of the same old playbook, and we will put blame on another, or put blame on a place where it really isn't coming from. So what we'll do is we'll just generically say that everybody's going to get sick because all of a sudden there's this germ that's going around. That's what we'll do. Because people are in fear of their life, and what do they fear most? Probably illness. That seems to be a trend of theirs, and they fear this plague type thing, and they fear anything apocalyptic, and they fear they just have fear in general as part of their belief system, because that's been instilled in them to have fear. So we'll use that belief system. Fear of there being an end time, fear of them coming into a situation where there's plagues and famine, and yeah, we can use all that stuff. We'll use their little religious book here as a playbook. We'll use it as a playbook. It says scriptures. It says scriptures. We use it as a playbook. Now, all of a sudden, out of nowhere, just one day everybody wakes up and on their little mouthpiece news media comes blaring out a story about this new germ that's spreading around the world. And what they decided to do was, in order to take this even further, they thought that in order to make it seem more real, they would have heads of states and presidents and premiers and religious leaders and all these people that they controlled from the top down agree that, yes, we're in a dire situation here and we need to take emergency measures, because if we say it's an emergency, well, then maybe they'll think that, well, if it's such an emergency, we really don't need to pay attention to our Constitution and our laws. All we care about is if our families and ourselves are going to be well and not catch this germ. So they were all fearful, the people on this planet. And then this council at the top said, well, we're not done here. What we're going to do is, this will be a good time to create a serum, let's say, or a liquid. And we'll get these people to think that this serum or this liquid is going to protect them. And they won't have anything to worry about. All they will need to do is line up and have it injected into them. And at the same time, we will accomplish a huge thing. We will have accomplished two things. We will have accomplished the fact that we have total control. See, it's really not about what we put in the liquid. It's about, can we get people to conform en masse? And it's not about anything that we may tell them to do. It's about conformity. It's about control. And also, while we're at it, just to see how far we can take this, at the same time that we say that we're going to put something into their bodies, we'll also stop them from breathing. We will cut their oxygen intake in half, or at least by a quarter. Because these species on this planet, we'll see, they're used to breathing in oxygen and putting out carbon dioxide. But hey, if we somehow can veil part of their face, the part where they breathe through their nose and mouth, we can tell them that it will stop the germ. And at the same time that we're telling them that it stops the germ, we're cutting their life force by a quarter to a half, because they're not breathing in oxygen anymore. They're breathing in carbon dioxide, which they normally put out, and the plants process it on this beautiful planet here and turn it back into oxygen so that the species can survive. But if we stop the species from breathing in oxygen and get them to breathe in the carbon dioxide that they're putting out, which is totally alien to their organism, well, we can complete our agenda of cutting down on the population, because these people's natural immunity to microbes will be cut down also. And it will make their immune systems weaker. Yeah, so that's a good plan. And now back to the liquid, to the serum that they want to put into people's bodies by way of sharp pointed objects. Well, what can we do with that? Well, they knew that these people had a DNA composition, and they knew that if they messed around with the DNA composition and they put certain elements and certain chemicals and certain intention into this liquid, that it would cause people to weaken their immune system even further. And as this happens, in conjunction with the mask, oh wow, this should really accomplish our goal here. Should really get us to the point where not only do we have control out of fear, and not only do we have willing compliance with harmful substances and harmful actions and harmful ways to dress and harmful ways to veil. Man, we got this under control. This is the coup de grace. This will be the ultimate crime against humanity, because humanity's getting out of control and we got to take care of this. We'll convince them that there's not enough room on the earth anyway, on this planet. Because they all live in cities, and all they know is their cities. They don't know about the hundreds and thousands of miles of free land or open land, mountains, rivers, streams. Oh, they just live in the cities and they travel from one to the next. And yeah, there's a few of them out in what they call rural areas. That's another thing we may want to do. We may want to limit their travel, and we may want to make it so they can't leave their house. Yeah, let's do that. That would be another good thing to add in order to smother both physically, mentally, and spiritually mankind, humankind. Yeah, we could do that. We'll institute that too, and if we'll call it lockdowns maybe, or something like that. All this will be completely for their own good, they will think. In fact, they buy into this so much, the people do, that it almost becomes a religion. It almost becomes like, well, I have a belief system. I have bought into a belief system. Just like I bought into the Messianic Son and Savior belief system. I bought into this, and so it's good for me, so it's got to be good for you too. It's got to be good for humanity as a whole, and the few. Now see, here's another part of the story. There's a few people on this planet that aren't buying any of this. Why? Because they always thought outside the herd mentality. They were considered black sheep, rebels. Oh, and you know what? We could even pull back that word terrorist, and we could put that on them too. Yeah, let's do that. We'll just give them no way, no opportunity to escape what we're going to lay on their heads. They will be so confused. And then we'll put in conflicting narratives within the narrative. That'll really confuse them. We'll say, hey, this is going to be good for you 1 minute, and then when they go do a procedure, then find out, we'll say, oh, well, even though you have that procedure, you can still get the germ. Well, what do we do then? Well, we add another follow-up of the first putting of fluid through a sharp object into your body or into their bodies. We'll say we're going to boost it. We're going to boost it a little because I guess it's not working. Now, here's another thing, too. When people start dying of this thing we're going to give them, we'll blame it on the germ. And they won't know the difference. They'll think they're dying from the germ, and actually they'll be dying from what we put in them. And you know, these people never question what's in a pharmaceutical, or because they know best for us, the doctors and these people that run the show, and the Surgeon General, and the this and the that. They know what's best for us. We don't have to question this at all. So here we go. And then we have these few people that are saying, well, you know, something don't seem right here. Something don't seem right. We're not in Kansas anymore, Toto. Something doesn't seem right here. Well, these people that were of this outside the herd mentality, the black sheep, the terrorists, the dissenters, were actually people that could think for themselves. And maybe were connected on a spiritual level to something that those in the herd mentality weren't connecting to. Maybe they had insight that the others didn't have. What to do with these people that are, let's say, earth warriors, planet warriors? So here we have the story. And this story is something that you should think about. And like I said at the beginning of this is just part of the story. This is just part of the crimes against this humanity. This is the tip of the iceberg. Now let's say that these people in this story start realizing that maybe this story isn't right, just because of this smaller group of people that maybe spread out the word a little bit. And one person talked to another person, talked to another person, talked to another person. And this word was kind of getting around about what was going on here. So what happens next? How much of the word do you think might get out? How much people will change their course of actions? Well, let's say people do change their course of action. But there's so many that have been made sick already. There's so many that have been made sick, but people could change their course of action. That's what these people are thinking. It really won't matter if they change their course of action, because we always have another trick up our sleeve. We always have another trick up our sleeve. If that one doesn't work, well, hey, we'll just take it another step further. What could we do next? What could we do next? Oh, you know what? We could really, really pull an ultimate covert 11. How could we put the last boot on their neck and stamp them down hard? Because they're almost lifeless as it is. We've got them totally under psychological control. Their will has been decimated. Their physical being and immunity systems have been decimated. How can we decimate them on a high spiritual level that it'll be complete then? How can we destroy their belief systems? Well, we'll think about that one. We'll think about that one. We'll think about it. We'll think about the story that I just told. We'll think about what could come next. We'll think about what course of action do we want to take. Well, if you look at revolutions, it was always the people that were the ones that had the real control, even though they had revolutionary leaders. It was the people that had the real control because they put it in the hands of these leaders. Now, if these leaders took over, let's say, a country or world or nation or village or whatever, and replaced the elders or leaders that were there, did these people take on the same characteristics of the tyrants that were in there? Well, the leaders might have, the leaders that the people chose for the revolution. They might change their attitude and say, hey, we see what the previous guys were talking about here. Yeah, we need more land, and we need to tax people, and we need to kill people, and we need to do this. Falling into the same old trap. But the people were still the same. The people didn't change. They wanted change, but they didn't change their mindset as to wanting freedom. So that's just a little caveat at the end of this story to let you know that the power lies with the people. This story, the crimes against humanity, they're all coming from a minority, a very, very small group of people that have learned to have mass control, that have learned to control the masses big time, big time. Are you going to let it continue? Are you going to let it continue? The power is with the people, not with the leaders, not with the ones that control the leaders, not with politics, not with religious leaders. The power lies deep within Mother Earth and your connection to it. See the tree over here? That's symbolic of the beliefs that are ancient beliefs before any kind of religious dogma or doctrine. That's what you need to cling to. Hug that tree. And Be called something that you might not like because it goes against the mainstream. You might be called a savage. You might be called an Indian. You might be called a cannibal. You might be called a tribal person. You might be called... They'll put all kinds of names. A pagan. Be a pagan. Be a pagan. And pagan means uniting with Sophia or Mother Earth, Utsi Maka, Gaia. Be an earthbound Kalika warrior, like I have talked about before. Unite to the brotherhood of those who know what's happening, those who are the true leaders, those who have your real best interests at heart. Well, I'll leave it there today, folks. Reflect on that story and this dialogue and take out of it what you will and compare it to what you will. Incidentally, I'll just put my book up here for a second. Listen to the Wind, Speak from the Heart. Lots of deep knowledge in here. Timeless book, award-winning. It just came out in hardbound, kind of a golden cover with yours truly on the front. And it just came out as a hard copy, and you can check that out at spiritofcrazyhorse.com. All one word, spiritofcrazyhorse.com. It's on there with some of my other material. So I'll leave it there today, people. Think on those things. Adios.